East Coast, and welcome to Living in the Promised Land, an immigrant rights podcast. I'm your host, Mark Schmorley, and today we're going back to Alligator Alcatraz in a couple of minutes or in a moment. I just with our guest Debbie Waking. We'll be there in a second, but I wanted to highlight sort of the news of the week, the big news, as the Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision in a case called Mullen versus Doe um, ruled that the president's ending of temporary protected status, in this case for Syrians and for Haitian citizens who are in the United States, uh, could go through. And we talked about temporary protected status um, last year when we went to, especially when we went to Springfield with the podcast and interviewed uh, the director of the Haitian Community Center there, and we talked about how it would affect that community, and we talked about how 1/3 of that community were Haitian nationals. They weren't all on TPS, obviously. They've been there 10 years, but that TPS is granted, just as a reminder, to a country. The president has the ability to designate a country at the time of an emergency. Usually, it is a natural disaster or a war, and it becomes unsafe for people to go back there throughout the whole country. So places that usually it's not very huge countries, because huge countries have places that are safe, and also if there's too much of a population in the United States, they're careful not to protect that whole population, and they're there, and it's granted for 18 months at a time, renewable, and oftentimes it becomes something that you get a generation of people because it's not rebuilt that quickly, or safety doesn't it isn't uh, happening that quickly. And so people generally stay here, and it's sort of like the government and the country understands that people remit money there and they're here, and it's important for their economy and helps rebuild it. And also folks here have set up their lives too, and they've been working. So it's tricky, but it's something that is generally, if it's ended, really the country has to be in good enough shape to take folks back. Well, in the case of Haiti, I don't believe there are commercial airlines in Haiti. The Haitian World Cup team, which miraculously made the World Cup this year, never able to play a game in Haiti. I think that's the first time that ever happened, and where a team qualified for the World Cup and could not play any of the qualifying games on their own home soil. I believe only one of their players was actually in Haiti. They trained outside. They did quite well. I mean, they didn't advance, but they did quite well in the World Cup. But also, there are no flights there. It is extremely dangerous. There is no real functioning government, and you just get it just gets really ugly because you turn folks against Haitians. I know South Florida. I mean, it's funny. Springfield, Ohio, is the third uh, largest community, but there's of course very large Haitian communities in Boston and of course in South Florida, and the Haitian diaspora does not generally have the support of other diasporas and other immigrants, and that's one of the things that that allowed this to expire. Now, there were two arguments in that case, which are important, and one of them is that when you end TPS, while the president has the ability to make this decision by Congress, the expectation, the norm was that there would be consultation with the State Department in this, and there is writing about that. And in this case, they consulted with the State Department. They didn't really seem to have come back with any answer, and um, I uh, so the question was, how could you decide that the conditions have changed to make it safe to go back? I mean, you really can't. But that didn't. Um, but the decision from the Supreme Court was basically the president has enough latitude that if the president says so, as as famously President Nixon said before he resigned the office, if the president does it, then it's legal. Well, okay. So that Justice Alito agreed with him. And so the other part was very interesting, and it's what got him, President Trump, slapped down last time, is that the president can has this power, but it in any case, you cannot violate civil rights that are guarded by the Constitution. And in this case, obviously, racial, you cannot take away a designation because you don't like the race of the people there. And the comments that President Trump made, calling it a shithole country, saying they all have AIDS, that's what they're bringing here, that they're garbage. Even like the actual professional comedians, one of them, I forgot his name, made the joke that Haiti was an island of floating garbage or something like that. Like this, it became part of pop culture in that culture. So it was very, very prevalent. And this is and what's really in as we look at a new paradigm of how we look at the world in the United States, and we say, well, even liberals will say, well, the argument is we can't be the protector of the world, but liberals say, but these are poor people and we need to help them. Haiti, just a brief history here, and I encourage people to look at the history of Haiti. um, Haiti was the first country in the hemisphere after the United States to be independent of its colonial. It fought off its colonial oppressor, in this case, France. And France was eager to get out of this hemisphere. They were getting, you know, their ass kicked in here, and they were also fighting in Europe, and they had their own revolution, and they were wanting to get out. So they surrendered, but as condition for Haiti to become independent, they had to pay an exorbitant amount of money until, as I was reminded last night by my son when he looked at it, get information easily these days, until 1947, Haiti was paying back France. What were they paying them for? France's loss of slaves. Just like the South got compensated, slave owners got compensated after our Civil War. So this is part of, instead of saying the colonial structure was so sick on people who were colonizers that they abused people who wanted to be free legitimately. We have this narrative that, oh, they're just a poor country because they can't manage themselves and we can't be taking care of them all the time. It's an insane um it's an insane paradigm coming from a country and where we uh brag about how we didn't pay any tax on tea. And I grew up in Massachusetts, so believe me, this is drilled in my head. No taxation without representation. How about if we had had to pay England for 150 years? Yeah. So, like against impossible odds, Haiti has survived. And, it's an amazing, resilient community. And I don't know what's going to happen here, but I have a feeling that they're going to outlast because, they do. But this is a harsh break. And so, with that note, Alligator Alcatraz. You all saw Reverend Jones was on talking about it. I posted that I finally got the chance to go before the vigils ended. We've been reporting from it. We know we've been learning all the time, and I'm always learning because even when I leave, I'm always learning. And um, so we have uh, Debbie Waking. She's the Episcopal Chapel Administrator at the University of Miami. Um, and she's been from the beginning. We've seen different people from the beginning, like the rock of one of the rocks. I know she won't take all the credit because there's amazing people down there. And we'll have more of them on who really, I think, a movement through the country. I think it was having been there and seen the conditions. I'm just amazed and proud of the folks that were there, and really just glad that I have had the chance to meet everybody and have them on and to be reporting from it. And so Alligator Alcatraz officially closed First, they said somebody from, I think, before Debbie was telling me it wasn't Governor DeSantis's office or his office, but somebody from one of the state agencies said, "Well, we're just getting, or maybe it was ICE. We're getting ready for hurricane season. We're going to pull them out of the Everglades." When last year they got lucky, there weren't not major hurricanes, but they still went through hurricane season. That didn't bother them. And so, what we know that the feds haven't paid them. That in the various lawsuits, each one is pointing a finger at the other. We know it's a mess. We know all of the cruelty, all of the things that were happening, and they kind of needed to cut tail and run on it. But it's almost July, and Debbie, you're out there with your cooling jacket. Uh, so what's going on with right now? What is the current state?
The current state is that we know that all the detainees have been moved. So that's a good thing. We worry about them because they either were deported or moved to other detention centers. And the move could have been complicated. Maybe they lost a court date here. Maybe they are further away from loved ones now. We don't know. My one small hope is that maybe any detention center is not as bad as this one is. So maybe it was a slight improvement, although being detained without due process is never acceptable.
Right. And so, okay, so the folks are all gone that you know of. Um,
Yes. So that doesn't mean that we're done. I have a sign that I had. It's a red background with black lettering, and it says "Shut it down." And the day after uh, Santis's press conference, the executive director of Friends of the Everglades had a press conference. And I remember showing somebody the sign and saying, I guess I don't need it anymore. But in point of fact, in my mind, it's not going to be shut down until everything they took in there to create the detention camp, the concentration camp in the Everglades, when everything is out and the signs are down and it doesn't say private property, no trespassing, and I can drive back there and see where it was and see that it is returned to nature, then it's done.
so when you say drive back there, for folks who have
Yeah.
been, I mean, it had been a while for me, and I don't know how many people have driven across Florida, but there were two roads to the Everglades, and this is the original one. This is the one.
Yes.
The other one didn't.
Built in 1928, this one.
That's right. It was the original one, and it was built in 1928 when, you know, they weren't woke as to how it would affect the Everglades, but it was a road through. And then up north, when they were and they understood, they built a big highway through. It's like a with rest areas, and and so this one goes through the Miccosukee Reservation, and the one up north goes through the Seminole, and it's much more traffic. And this goes from really Miami, Hialeah area of Miami to Naples, and it's the one road, and really, we talked about there's not much on it outside the reservation. There's just a little sliver of land that's not part of the reservation where they put this on, and so it was an airstrip that was kind of left alone in the 70s because they realized the environmental devastation. So so you see them, and so off of this road, we don't get you see a sign, but then there's this other road that kind of goes as perpendicular, right? And it goes for like how
Right.
many miles?
It could be as many as 3 or 4 before you actually get to the employee parking lot.
So yeah, so just think about you're driving
Yeah.
through, and then you get to this employee parking lot, and you would see the cars coming in and out. And so are there employees there now that are going in and out? Do you see that or?
Today is the first day that I see. I've only been here an hour and a half or so, but that it seems like there's fewer personal vehicles, which would be employees. Here
And again,
goes.
you're there reporting like this, and this has been going on since the beginning because this is one of the most opaque and non-transparent operations, even in the world of ICE secrecy that is around because they're not. they haven't made announcements of when they're tearing things down or when or anything like that, right?
Right. We first heard about it when the New York Times reported that vendors who supply things back there had been advised that it was all the detainees would be gone by the end of May, and then they were going to start tearing it down, and that the reason was that it was too expensive. Nobody ever confirmed that. That was just New York Times reporting. And then the next thing we heard was that the vendors were told, no, we're not quite ready. It's going to be pushed back 2 weeks. We're still getting rid of some detainees. And there was a congressman from Central Florida, Maxwell Frost, who made a visit inside in the last week of May. And he said he was told there were 665 detainees at that time. But now sadly, they are all moved out and they are starting to bring things out. We've seen showers, big, long, white trailers that house maybe 4 different shower stalls. We've seen many, many, many of those come out. And now I'm seeing many, many, many. They look like travel trailers. But we've known from the beginning that the guards were being housed in trailers and that they were working 12-hour days, 21 days in a row, and then they get a week off. As far as I know, that lasted the whole time. But now we're starting to see the trailers go out, and I've seen many of them, and I'm not here 24/7. I presume it continues when I go home. And to me, every trailer represents a guard who's unemployed.
Right, right. Because most of these, the detainees, you don't know where they've been sent, but they haven't transferred.
Right. The guards I doubt have transferred. No, I suppose it's possible. I
Yeah,
don't
these are
honestly.
local jobs in an area where there's, if
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not great. So this was something, and at the beginning there was, one whistleblower who talked about, who warned us, who said this is what's really going on in there. Just like, and
Right.
it was shocking for them. I mean, remember they never had plumbing, they never had proper, everything had to be trucked in, waste in, water in, nothing, no potable water, people living in trailers, people being detained in
No
trailers.
electricity. No
Yeah,
electricity either.
yeah, generators. And so now, as with, well, I just want to talk for a second about, I know Congressman Frost was there often. He was a voice, a national voice.
Yeah.
We have 435 Congress members. They Maxwell Frost is from the Orlando area, and the two largest detention centers are not in his district. Oftentimes, they are in districts of Republicans, and because they are in very rural places, and in Florida, it's a majority. But the other one, Deportation Depot, which is up north in Baker County, is also,
Right.
more conservative areas. But one of the things I want to note here, and I see this around the country, is that it shouldn't matter. This is the thing about when we talk about ideology and partisanship, etc. It doesn't, whatever, I mean, in this case with, immigrant detention is its own separate subject, but in any sort of detention, even if you believe in a heavy carceral state that we have right now, abusing pr people who are detained, and that is what's happening. There's no question. There's nobody who's gone in there who says it's not abusive. And the evidence of that is that anytime they were stopping spot visits. If you're running a jail right, you don't care if somebody walks in. I mean, I've done enough
Correct.
work in jails over the years that, I've taught in jails, I've had clients in jails, etc., that, you have clergy walking in, you have social workers walking in, you have, community people who want to help them put on a play or book people or read to them, and they don't stop you at the door because you're being abusive inside. It's kind of like, if social services is knocking on somebody's door in an abusive household, and they say, no, 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 come back later, or something like that. I mean, it
Yeah.
really, it only has that tinge. So I don't care your ideology. And, we know this from people like Ted Cruz, cowards, cowards, because even if you believe that these folks should get the largest penalty for whatever, if you believe in abusing them and you don't
Yeah.
believe it's your, you inherently, I mean, you're not going to say you believe in abusing them, but you are endorsing that by not providing your oversight. And that's the very, very, very least of that they could do. And we don't even get that. So
I have a sign that says silence is complicit.
silence is complicit for folks in general. Once you know, it's
Yeah.
criminal if you're in the Senate and you, if that is your district, and
Yeah.
if that is your district and you can't say, hey, I'm not going to question why they're there or anything like that. You can, but I'm going to say that if you don't provide them, adequate
Yeah.
medical care, because, people are dying in high numbers, etc. So again,
It's no question that Representative Frost was out here the most. He did see Debbie Wasserman Schultz a few times too.
but again, South Florida closer, but not in the,
Yeah.
not governing.
My representative didn't see him, Carlos Jimenez. He's Republican.
And I think
Shouldn't
it's,
be
isn't
here,
it in
but
Lincoln Diaz Balart, I think is the,
right.
and Lincoln Diaz Balart, these are these guys who talk about, you know, how we need to starve Cuba because they don't have freedom and we don't, and the sickness, and this is where we need to like think critically. Why would somebody want to starve people, put an embargo on, starve people in Cuba, deny them medical care when they have among the best doctors in the world just because of resources, and deny them the ability to help other people? We're going to do an episode on the barring of Cuban doctors and all of that, and how that affects immigration and how that affects human rights. But here are these people who are supposed to be the beacons of freedom, the beacons of freedom, and even their own people, even their own community of Cubans. Like we know that with Ariane Betancourt, one of the heroes of
Right.
the Alligator Alcatraz protest, and um, whose father was detained. And it was and she got that publicity. She put her whole life on hold to be there for her dad. Right in that community, didn't care. She
Yes.
didn't care.
And she later, when she had to take him to the hospital, discovered that he was having many strokes and he was probably having them while he was detained, and they just ignored him. I mean,
Right.
he asked for medical attention and they denied it.
Yep. And that is a common thing. This is shut down. This is again like we, it is we're in a sense on our own. Like, okay, we are the lawyers. There are politicians spending a lot of time, getting them involved, but also just the community being there is what brought folks out. And that's, people can do that. People, you can't change. You can just point out that these folks who are beacons of freedom, the USA, freedom, no dungeons like Cuba, what the things they're saying about these other countries. They're going to bring freedom, but in his own district, he cannot make sure that a man who I believe was already diabetic, and was not going to.
And lost 45 pounds while he was there.
Yep, and they all lose 30 pounds their first month, mostly. All of them, like all the ones I've had, generally. Yeah, and not being adequately fed. That you can't say that putting up a makeshift jail without a bathroom, without running water, if for no other reason, if you have no empathy, that's fine. I mean, it's bad, but it's fine. But then, how much, Debbie, have you all in Florida had to pay for this?
1.2 billion so far.
Billion with a
There,
B.
there was a grant set aside to reimburse states that were doing immigration work. I think it was 608 um, is it million, 608 million, and we were told that we would get that, and we were eventually awarded that, but we haven't received anything of it until fairly recently. We did get 50 million. That's not anywhere close to 1.2 billion.
Yeah.
We will never get reimbursed for all of it.
So they're never going to be reimbursed. It comes out of your state budget. So you have to pay. They didn't do oversight. the feds, and it didn't it didn't even control an overflow population because there were beds elsewhere. They did this to make this point and intimidate, etc. And you all were there, and that made a big difference being out there. So, but we know that they want to cut and run. This is the ultimate cut and run, and pretend nothing happened. But
Uh,
there's still there's still the lawsuits going on, right?
yes, before it opened, the Friends of the Everglades, which was founded in 1969 by Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, who helped get the Everglades National Park established in the late 40s. Um, Friends of the Everglades and the Center for Biological Diversity filed a lawsuit saying the court, you've got to stop them from opening this because they never got the legally required by federal law environmental impact study. Well, before the court got to it, it was opened, and the federal judge Kathleen Williams had 4 days of hearings, and the plaintiffs brought all kinds of experts to explain the damage that they were doing to the environment that was already taking place, and how they promised they weren't going to do any more asphalt. They'd already added 20 acres worth of it, and just endangered species and threatened species were being impacted, and so were the Miccosukee. They couldn't access their sacred land. And so she said, okay, I'm going to order a temporary injunction saying that it has to be disassembled essentially while we litigate this. And of course, they appealed, and a week or two later, a three-judge panel from the 11th Circuit Court said, oh, yes, we agree with the defendants. They're saying how terrible it's going to be that they just don't have any place to put all these evil immigrants. So we're going to put a stay on the order telling it to close during litigation. And if they want to make it build it up bigger while they're at it, that's fine too. And so that's what they did. They opened it up. They started putting more detainees in. I think they opened with a capacity of 2,000. It increased to at least 3,000, although we don't know. I don't think it ever had that many at one time.
Yeah, and we've just it's great to get the reminder of sort of the history of this because people, even my colleagues, well, wait a minute. When I said I was down there, wasn't it shut down? Like, folks, if this is confusing to you, stay with us because
Yeah.
I talk to folks in Texas and they talk about Fort Bliss and all. It's confusing to me. We can't follow everything. It's okay because most people don't know because it's really hard to report it, and there wasn't that much media there. There was
Well,
some, but not.
and, and when the judge said shut it down, that got a lot of national attention.
Yeah,
But when the court said, oh, no, don't do that, that didn't get as much coverage.
right. And what was fascinating about the appellate court, not just the fact of the corruption of it, it's one of the worst. The 11th Circuit, it was a 2-1 on a three-person panel, but one of the judges' husband was had the services contract for um, Alligator Alcatraz, and so
Didn't even know that.
yeah, it's that level of corruption. So because when you do a stay so that one, you have a high chance of winning is how you get a stay on the behavior, and two, the harm can't be reversed. So what the court
Right.
said was that they weighed the harm to the environment in the
Yeah.
Everglades, and they weighed the harm to the Miccosukee, and they said against the harm to the administration of being able to continue to pursue its immigration policy. And they said, well, this is they say irreparable harm. So they said, which is one of the most ironic, sick, judicially sick decisions ever to say that paving over the Everglades, continuing to pollute and literally
Right.
have nowhere to put waste, etc., and to create this sort of city, prison city in an area that is extreme, that's not populated at all, is was insane. But that's how they balanced it. And the which shows where justice goes. And I know from having spoken behind the scenes with some of the folks um from the Miccosukee tribe, that they laid low with the media. Like they didn't want to even come on here, because, and that's understandable. I wouldn't pressure them, because we know one of the things, Trump had some certain things that stuck in his craw the most, personally, historically. And one of them is um his personal war on the Indians, which has nothing to do with anything other than they got a break on I think it was the Mohawk, but in I think it's the Mohawk in Connecticut. They got a casino that they didn't have to pay taxes on, which is part of their land. And he said, "Now they're not real Indians." And he went and testified before Congress, because at the same time his crappy casino was going bankrupt in Atlantic City, and he was going through a mental breakdown. And so actually, that's when I first became really aware. I was teaching advanced English as a second language in an institution, and I was teaching literature, and I was teaching Native American literature, and so I was and aware of what was going on in the culture a little bit. And his testimony for Congress was one of the first things, and he really did say, they're not real Indians, they're walking, and because they weren't fit a stereotype or what have you, and he really didn't like the fact, he felt like he was being cheated by not getting. So is it
I'm
personal
sure
thing?
the reason they got a tax break is because they're a sovereign nation. Why should they have to
Right.
pay our
Well, yeah,
taxes?
and yeah, sovereign nation is kind of like the least you could do, kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
but that whole hit, so that was his thing. And so the Miccosukee were very, very reluctant to be public about it, and they kept it very low in the
Yeah.
media. So that left the
But they did,
environmentalists.
they did, they did a couple of weeks in join the other two plaintiffs as a party to the lawsuit, though.
Yeah, no, no, yeah, no, they did. They had the lawsuit, but they kind of let that speak for itself, and that made sense. So,
Yes.
and it's difficult. So one of the points I want to make for folks out there is, again, use your privilege. Use your privilege. And your privilege in this case is going to be, I mean, obviously nobody really has privilege, and everything is a risk, as we know with Renee Good and Alex Pretty. We know that. But we also know that your voice can be there, and even if you're in Florida or anywhere else where there's a detention center, and you have a congressman or a senator, you can speak to them about it, and you can organize in your communities, because some people's voice isn't there. And that's particularly true with the whole, with what's going on with TPS and everything also. But um yeah, and also, this kindling of, I mean, I've told people my own sort of Florida story. I came back to Florida. I never was raised there, but my dad went to University of Miami, and they moved there in the 50s, and it was the respite for my own family. My grandmother having left, her two brothers killed in the Holocaust, and just loved Miami Beach, and they was their peaceful place to be. And that was where, and so, when I went back, I went to college, and I studied history, so we had to learn Florida history. And Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, heroes, these heroes of the Ever. There is this tradition of protecting the Everglades, and there's this tradition of environmental activism, which has been so um overtaken in recent years by the politics of Florida, which is that it tries to attract people with no tax breaks and not a lack of, but that also means with no taxes. What that also means, yeah, lots of tax breaks, but no taxes, and that also means, public services and
Services.
protection, and those agencies have been really cut after 20 years of increasingly right-wing governments. And in this case, Florida seems to be on the hook, and I hope folks are going after that. But the lawsuits still continue, because the lawsuits address the damage, and that still needs to be assessed. So, as I
Right.
understand that these lawsuits are going to continue, we're going to follow them.
Yep.
You can't
Yep.
just cut and run. It's kind of
Yep.
like you can't, you know, thinking as a kid, you can't throw a rock through somebody's window, and then just leave and say, okay, I'm not there anymore. Um, I'm not doing it anymore because you have to pay for the damage you've done, and there is considerable damage that's been done.
And in today's world, you're on somebody's ring camera anyway.
Yes.
Have evidence.
Well, these guys managed to keep the film. I mean, these guys did manage to keep this really secretive, and they
Yes, they did.
managed to do that, and it made this. It's what made this so amazing, like your movement, and just talking a little bit about your movement is that you started out with like this 24-hour vigil, and it dropped off. When these things happen, the oftentimes, and this is what happened in 2018, because I went a year later to the border and there was nobody there, and that's okay because daily protests were what was needed to service the community and all of that, and it's sort of, but it's really hard to maintain it and to grow the protests, and you all did that. So how did you form this foundation?
Well, I had done it in 2019 in Homestead, where there was a detention center for people aged 13 to 17. So I was grounded in it, and it was like when he got elected in November of 24. My thought was, this is really bad. What can I do? And my only answer was, keep your antenna up, and you'll know it when you see it. Well, I saw it and I knew it. So I just started coming out, and I realized this has some differences from Homestead. One is we're not all coming from the same general area. We're coming from two different sides of the peninsula of Florida. So I can't schedule it. I can just show up, and whoever's there is there. But we did form community, and the best thing that happened to us was that Betty Osceola, one of the Miccosukee elders, organized a multi-faith prayer vigil on one day. And a week later, the United Methodist Church from Naples was hosting a second one. And I think by the week after that, there was an alliance of churches, including a couple of Unitarian Universalist churches, of course, rotating, taking turns. And at some point, the Worker Circle, a secular Jewish organization that's been around at least 125 years, got involved, and they started providing a bus to pick people up at Fort Myers and on Naples on the West Coast and bring them here. And had it taken longer, they were about to organize buses from Miami as well. And so that every Sunday afternoon at 4 grew into a real presence that got attention. And that was important. And I think those of us who continued to come out when we could during the week, here we sit right across the street from the sign that says Alligator Alcatraz, where everybody goes in or comes out, and there's two state troopers with their lights flashing sitting there, and they know we're here, and they know we're watching, and we saw them do things like buses of detainees coming and going after we were gone after dark. So we were having, in our own little way, an impact, and
Oh,
and so we just kept doing that.
and one of the things and again, I have, hopefully provided some, you know, answered some questions for people that have been there about, I mean, there's some
Yeah.
great lawyers there too. But a little bit, but even what was amazing was my first uh show I did from there, being here and zooming in, was one of the people that was there, Wesley, was a local. People came from
Mhm.
all over the country. The other two had come from elsewhere, and the people were
Yeah.
coming, but
Chicago and Atlanta.
yep. But
Yeah.
Wesley was a local construction. He worked in construction. So I was fascinated. He was identifying all the things that went in. And now you wouldn't bring that kind of cinder block in unless you were building this kind of road. And it's like that is the information that the lawyers used, and that is the information that was cited in the case. So
Yep.
when we say it takes everybody, we mean it takes everybody.
And Wesley and I were out here at the same time last week.
Oh, good.
Uh,
Okay. Okay.
and
Yeah,
I
because
left. I went home about 9:30 at night, and when I came back the next day, the next afternoon, he was still here. He had pulled an overnight shift.
wow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, because he wanted to make sure they trucked out. Well, he's
Yes. Yes. That's
it's
it
incredible.
exactly.
Well, I was when I was there, well, had the privilege to be there last month. I was there for both the vigil, the interfaith vigil, and the May Day rally the same weekend.
Yes.
There were only about two. There were only two people that were at both. And so there were
You and
different
me?
you missed one. You missed one because you had a family
I
event.
wasn't there on Sunday. Okay.
Yeah,
I
you missed
maybe
one
that's
because you
the one
had a
I missed.
commitment. You had a
Okay.
commitment, but there were completely different
Yes,
people, and there were some
constituents.
and there were some
Yeah.
younger folks that were beginning to come and had this would have gone on longer had they've closed it. So
Yes.
and also they kind of closed it at a good time because we know what summer is like in Florida in general,
Yes.
and um
However, the director of social justice for the worker circle suggested that we might want to go to the rallies outside the Broward Transitional Center, which is another detention center, on the second and fourth Sunday. So maybe some of those young people will be there.
absolutely people. This is the thing is. And this is what I learned in the border. I mean, I couldn't go in 2018 when my friends and my colleagues were going down there, and it was like the kids in cages all over the news, and you know, wealthy liberals were flying them down on private jets and all that. And I happened to be moving that particular week, and so
Yeah.
I couldn't. But I went down the next February and met with unaccompanied kids down there for a week, and in a and they weren't protesting anymore, but there was the need to do the service and the work. So you'd be
Right.
people would be amazed at the role they can play. I mean, healthcare workers, they know the questions to ask. They know the
Yeah.
questions
Yeah.
to ask. Healthcare workers, clergy, you all know. I mean, I know Alligator Alcatraz. They were not allowing clergy that wasn't Catholic, right? Just
Yes, the Archbishop finally got a permission for Catholic priests to come in and say Mass and counsel people, but none of the non-Catholic clergy ever got in.
and when you think about it, when I was in college, I taught at the Alachua County in Gainesville, Florida, um, House of Corrections, and I had students that were on death row. They had clergy. It's, I mean, we see that clergy. The fact that um they were not allowing clergy in that were not Catholic, and that was not a regular. That was took a long
Right,
time. It was not a regular visit. Not to mention not allowing families in,
right,
taking forever to allow lawyers, and they didn't have a room for lawyers. That was another lawsuit. Was access to counsel. I mean, it is.
right.
This is and that part of the lawsuit is still going on. Like that's still going on, and we're going to continue to follow that. Um, so what's the next step? Are you coming out there weekly or
Well, yeah, I'm coming out quite frequently because I'm afraid I'll miss something, you know. But I will keep coming out until I can go back there and see it myself. And
that's
I'm having a meeting after church this Sunday, after coffee hour, to ask for feedback from my community about ideas for what to do next. And so I'll keep you posted.
right, right? And some of the questions that we have, over here, I is is they've clearly. I'm gonna pretty much say I'm pretty cautious with what I'll say, even though I may have some radical views on facts, but I would be very shocked if there is not some real environmental damage back there that we don't know. And you can't fly a drone over it. I'm sure you can't do
Right.
that.
They can fly drones
Yeah,
because I was there was a drone watching me one day as I sat right
sure.
here.
I'm glad it
Yeah,
was. I'm glad it just had eyes and nothing else.
me
But
too. But
the
if I put a drone up, I'd get arrested.
yeah, and so we don't know what's going on back there. We don't have we know that I mean, it's kind of like if you're a kid and I mean, it reminds me like it's like you do something wrong, then you blame and some. I mean, I'm thinking of our reflecting pool issue here, where you just have this general incompetence beyond
Yeah.
anything else, corruption and incompetence and lazy work, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, some of it's just straight up cruelty. Some of it's absolute indifference, and some of it is like they just don't care, and some of it is absolute incompetence.
Yeah.
And that's the scary part. So thank you again for all you have done and for your leadership there, and for sending people to Broward, because I know Chrome is, I mean, anytime, all of you guys, this is being
Yeah.
done in your name, in your states. And I'm talking to
Exactly.
you, Michigan. We're going to go back to Baldwin. We've been to Baldwin before, but I've been called again by Baldwin. We're going to actually have um one of the state senators from Michigan. She's getting debriefed on what she can't say, but she's going to come on next because she did a visit and horrified, horrified up there in Michigan, California. I've got somebody in Texas right now. It's kind of in this in the news, but it's a military spouse whose health is taken a huge turn for the worst, and she's getting awful medical care in Prairie Land, Texas, right outside of Dallas. And that's gotten some news coverage. And but these detention centers are being done in your name, and it's you're already paying for 800, is it billion, for ICE in their budget. These are private corporations running the jails. Nobody has we've talked about the accountability. It's hard to read, and it's being done. You Floridians get to be double taxed on it because you're going to be left holding the bag. And
Yeah.
that should be an issue in all your elections. And you need to, folks, it's an election year. And
Yes.
you need to not accept, we know where most of the Republicans are going to be on it, ignoring, supporting, whatever. Don't accept Democrats who say, well, we just need it to be done cleanly and all that. No, you look at it a lot more deeply. There are some, follow the Maxwell Frosts, follow the ones who are there,
Right.
and demand that your folks go there and demand that they report. And that could be state ones too. So
Yeah.
thank you again for all your work and for inspiring all kinds of people to do things. And
Well, thank you for helping us to get the word out.
oh,
That's a big
more
part
than
of
my
it.
pleasure. More, and I'm just glad I got to be there to see
Oh,
the
we were so
rally.
happy to be down here in May.
And yeah, yeah. So thank you. And this is not this is not the end. I know, but it's very close to it.
Yeah. Yeah, we
Okay,
are very close to it. And then it'll be a time of transition for me too. And when I know where my feet land, I'll be in touch.
perfect, perfect. Okay,
Okay.
and I just want to say thanks to Debbie, and thank you to producer Stephanie Buatois and Jeff Barsky and Pete Kovitz for the intro and outro music.